Get your filthy black hands off that door. You're stinking up the whole garage.
The light died. Everything went dark. 3 drunk men shoved her into the corner. One blocked the exit. The tallest spat at her feet.
Please, I just need my car.
Animals don't drive!
He pushed her harder against the cold wall. His buddy dumped her bag on the concrete. Wallet, keys, phone. Crushed the phone under his boot.
On your knees, homie! Pick it up like the dog you are.
Picked up each item without a word. He grabbed her collar, pinned her to the wall.
Crawl out before I lose my patience.
She stood, brushed the dust off, and smiled. What those men didn't know, the woman they'd cornered in that dark garage had spent 12 years training the most lethal soldiers on Earth. 2 weeks before that night in the garage, Brianna Irving woke at 4:53 in the morning. Same as every morning. No alarm. Her body hadn't needed one in 12 years. She laced up her running shoes in the dark, stretched her calves against the porch railing, and ran 6 miles through the empty streets of Riverside, Memphis. Past the renovated lofts, past the new coffee shops with chalkboard menus and $8 lattes, past the craft brewery that used to be a tire warehouse where her uncle once worked. Riverside had changed. 10 years ago, it was a working-class neighborhood, mixed, modest, mostly black families who'd lived there for generations. Then the developers came. Then the boutiques. Then the young white professionals with golden retrievers and noise complaints. One by one, the old families sold and left. Brianna stayed. She ran a small bike repair shop called Second Gear, tucked between a laundromat and a nail salon on Greer Street. The shop smelled like chain oil and rubber. She fixed flats, rebuilt derailleurs, trued wheels. The work was quiet, repetitive, precise. She liked that. It reminded her of field stripping a rifle. Every piece in its place, every motion deliberate. What her customers didn't know, what nobody in Riverside knew, was that Brianna Irving had spent 12 years inside Fort Bragg training Delta Force operators in close-quarters combat. Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, tactical hand-to-hand. She had designed combatives curricula for Tier 1 units. She had sparred with men twice her size and put them on the ground before they could blink. She left the military at 32, after a torn rotator cuff ended her operational career. The Army offered her a desk. She chose Memphis instead. Chose silence. Chose a life where her hands fixed things instead of breaking them. There was a scar on her right forearm, 4 inches long, pale against her dark skin. She always wore long sleeves, even in August. When customers asked about the heat, she just smiled and said she ran cold. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was the only person who treated her like she belonged. 71 years old, white, retired schoolteacher. She brought Brianna pound cake on Sundays and complained about her hip. She never asked where Brianna came from. She never asked why Brianna sometimes stood at the window at 3 in the morning, staring at nothing. The rest of Riverside was less welcoming. The woman at the dry cleaner counted change twice when Brianna paid. The man at the hardware store followed her through the aisles. Mothers pulled their children closer when she jogged past. Nobody said anything outright. They didn't have to. Their eyes said enough. And then there was Wade Thornton, 28, unemployed, son of Deputy Chief Ray Thornton of the Memphis Police Department. Wade drove a black pickup truck with a Confederate flag bumper sticker and spent most evenings drinking with his 2 friends. Derek Sills and Cody Branch, at a bar called the Wheelhouse on 5th Street. Wade had a habit. Every few weeks he picked a target. Always someone who couldn't fight back. Always someone darker than him. He'd follow them, taunt them, record it on his phone, and show it to his friends like a trophy. When one of his targets filed a complaint, the report disappeared. His father made sure of it. Wade noticed Brianna the first week she moved in. A black woman, alone, quiet, running a little shop in his neighborhood. He didn't like it. "She thinks she belongs here," he told Derek one night, 3 beers deep. "She doesn't." Derek laughed. Cody raised his bottle. Brianna knew about Wade. She'd seen his truck circle her block. She'd heard his voice in the parking lot late at night, loud and ugly. She knew the type. She'd trained men who hunted men like Wade in caves halfway across the world. But she said nothing, did nothing, because the whole point of leaving the army was to stop fighting. She didn't know yet that some fights come looking for you, whether you want them or not. It started on a Saturday night. Brianna closed second gear at 8, wiped down the workbench, locked the front door, and walked the 6 blocks home through the warm Memphis evening. Crickets hummed in the hedges. The streetlights buzzed amber against the darkening sky. She cut through the parking garage on Elm Street. It was the shortest route. She'd done it 100 times. Wade Thornton was leaning against a concrete pillar with Derek and Cody. 3 six-packs deep. Empty cans crushed around their feet like spent shell casings. Wade saw her first. "Well, well." He straightened up, blocked her path. "There she is. The neighborhood is stray." Brianna kept walking, eyes forward, hands at her sides. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Wade stepped closer. His voice echoed off the low ceiling. "Are you deaf or just stupid?" "Probably both, right, boys?" Derek laughed. Cody pulled out his phone and started recording. "You smell that?" Wade sniffed the air dramatically. "That's the smell of someone who doesn't belong. Like mildew, like rot, like something that crawled in from the gutter." Brianna stopped. "Excuse me, I'd like to pass." "You'd like to pass?" Wade mimicked her voice in a high-pitched whine. "Listen to her, talking like she's people." He turned to Derek. "Grab her bag." Derek snatched the strap off her shoulder, unzipped it, dumped everything onto the concrete. A wrench, a water bottle, her wallet, her keys. He kicked the keys across the floor. "Fetch," Wade said. Brianna looked at the keys, looked at Wade. Then she knelt, slowly, and picked them up. One by one. No expression, no trembling, just precise, controlled movements. The kind of calm that didn't come from weakness. Wade didn't recognize it. He saw submission. "Good girl." He patted her head twice. "Now get out of my garage before I make you crawl." She stood, walked past all 3 without a word. Her footsteps echoed down the ramp and into the night. When she got home, Brianna opened the hallway closet. Inside, behind winter coats she never wore, hung a faded olive-green duffel bag with the Delta Force insignia stitched on the flap. She touched the canvas. Then she closed the door. But she didn't lock it. The next morning, Brianna arrived at second gear to find the words spray-painted across her front window in red block letters. One word. The ugliest word in the English language. It dripped down the glass like a wound that wouldn't close. She stood there for a long time. Then she went inside, filled a bucket with soapy water, and scrubbed it off before the first customer arrived. It took 40 minutes. Her arms ached. The red never fully came out of the grout between the bricks. By noon, 2 of her regulars, white men who'd been bringing their bikes to her for months, walked in, saw the faint stain on the glass, and walked right back out. They didn't say a word. They didn't have to. That week, her revenue dropped by half. Wade Thornton sat in the wheelhouse 3 nights later, showing Derek and Cody the video from the garage on his phone. He replayed the moment Brianna knelt to pick up her keys. He replayed it 5 times. "Look at her face," Wade said, grinning. "Not a damn thing. Like a robot. Like she doesn't even feel it." "Maybe she doesn't," Derek said. "Then we gotta try harder." Wade flagged the bartender for another round. "Daddy says don't leave marks. Use words. Words don't bruise." He tapped his temple. "Smart." Cody leaned in. "What if she calls the cops?" Wade laughed so hard he spilled his beer. "Calls the cops? My old man is the cops. Who's going to take her report? Officer Jenkins? He was at my birthday party last year." He wiped his mouth. "She's got nobody. That's the whole point." The following Tuesday, Brianna found a dead rat nailed to her shop door with a note stapled to its tail. "Last warning. Leave, or next time, it won't be a rat." She removed the nail with pliers, dropped the rat in the dumpster, filed a report at the Riverside precinct. The officer at the desk, a thick-necked man named Sergeant Collins, typed slowly with 2 fingers, asked her to spell her last name 3 times, then said he'd look into it. He never did. 3 days later, Brianna called to follow up. The report had been lost. Not deleted, not rejected, just lost. Like it had never existed. She filed another one. That one disappeared too. Mrs. Patterson brought pound cake that evening. She sat at Brianna's kitchen table and held her hand. "Sweetheart, maybe it's time to go. Find somewhere safer." Brianna stared at the crack in her kitchen wall. "If I leave, they win. And I've never run from anything in my life." "I know. That's what worries me." The following Friday at 2 a.m, a bottle crashed through Brianna's bedroom window. Glass exploded across her pillow. Cold air rushed in. Outside, tires screeched. Laughter faded into the dark. She swept the glass with bare feet on cold wood. A shard cut her soul. She didn't feel it. She was too busy controlling her breathing. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. Box breathing. The technique she'd taught to soldiers before combat drops into hostile zones. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from restraint. Every fiber in her body wanted to chase that truck. Every synapse fired with 12 years of trained response. Pursue, engage, neutralize. But she stood still, broom in hand, blood smearing the hardwood. She chose not to fight. Again. Wade's father knew. Deputy Chief Ray Thornton sat in his home office the next evening while Wade bragged about the bottle through the window. "Clean work," Ray said, not looking up from his laptop. "No prints?" "Gloves, like you taught me." Ray nodded slowly. "Good. Let her sweat. She'll pack up by the end of the month. They always do." "And if she doesn't?" Ray looked at his son for the first time. "Then we make her life so miserable, she wishes she had." This was not rage. This was policy. The Thorntons didn't see Brianna as a threat. They saw her as an inconvenience, a stain on their neighborhood, same as the spray paint on her window. Something to scrub out. The next week was the worst. Monday, someone slashed all 4 tires on every bicycle inside second gear. 12 bikes, 48 slashes. Brianna spent $300 on new tubes. Wednesday, Derek followed Brianna through the grocery store, filming her on his phone, narrating in a mock nature documentary voice. And here we observe the urban creature in its natural habitat, pretending to read labels it probably can't understand. 3 people heard. Nobody intervened. Thursday, Wade and Cody cornered her in the open parking lot behind the laundromat. Broad daylight, pedestrians on the sidewalk. "Still here?" Wade said, arms crossed, smiling. "I gotta say, you're stubborn for your kind." "I'm going home," Brianna said. "Home?" Wade stepped closer. "This ain't your home. You don't have a home. Not here. Not anywhere." He gestured at the street around them. "Look around. Anybody helping you? Anybody care?" Brianna looked. A woman across the street turned away. A man loading groceries into his car kept his eyes down. A teenager with earbuds walked past without slowing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody cared. Wade grinned. "See? You're nothing here. You're invisible. You're less than invisible. You're a problem nobody wants to solve." Brianna said nothing. She walked home, locked the door, drew the curtains. Then she opened the closet. This time, she didn't just touch the duffel bag. She pulled it out, unzipped it. Inside, her compression top, her training gloves, her mouth guard, and a laminated card with the Delta Force creed printed in small black letters. She read the creed once, twice. Her jaw tightened. She pulled on the gloves, made a fist, then another. The leather creaked against her knuckles like a language her body had never forgotten. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not anger, not revenge. Something older. Something trained into her bones across 12 years and 10,000 repetitions. Readiness. That night, Brianna called the only person who'd understand. Sergeant Nina Calloway picked up on the second ring. They hadn't spoken in 8 months, but Nina's voice landed like a hand on a shoulder. Steady, warm, no questions first. Brianna told her everything. The spray paint, the rat, the bottle, the vanishing police reports, the son, the father. The system wrapped around them like armor. Nina was quiet for a long time. "B, you trained operators who took down terror cells in places most people can't find on a map. 3 drunk idiots in a parking garage? You could end it in 8 seconds. A pause. But you do it stupid, they bury you. You do it smart, they bury themselves." The plan was simple. Brianna bought 3 small cameras, the kind that mounted with adhesive, the kind nobody noticed. One in the garage stairwell, one above the exit ramp, one in the corner where they'd shoved her. She kept every note, photographed every slashed tire, screenshotted Derek's video, built a file, dated, organized, the way she'd built after-action reports at Fort Bragg. Then she started training again, alone, at night, curtains drawn. Her body remembered everything. The trap was set. All she needed was for them to walk into it. Friday night, 9:46 p.m. Brianna closed second gear, turned the deadbolt, and walked the 6 blocks home the same way she always did. Through Elm Street, through the parking garage, past the concrete pillars and the flickering lights she'd stopped trusting weeks ago. She knew they'd be there. She could smell the beer before she saw them. Wade Thornton leaned against the exit ramp barrier with a fresh bottle in his hand. Derek sat on the hood of someone else's car, legs dangling. Cody crouched by the stairwell door, scrolling through his phone. All three looked up when her footsteps echoed across the concrete. "No way!" Wade pushed off the barrier and spread his arms wide. "She came back! Boys, she actually came back!" The 3 cameras Brianna had mounted were already recording. Red indicator lights no bigger than a grain of rice. Silent. Patient. Waiting. Just like her. "Let me through, please." Wade tilted his head. "Let me through, please," he repeated in a mocking falsetto. He looked at Derek. "You hear that? She said please, like she's people." He turned back to Brianna. "You're not people. You know what you are? You're a stain. A stain on this neighborhood, on this garage, on this whole damn street." He stepped closer. His shadow swallowed hers under the humming fluorescent bar. "You want to know the truth? Nobody wanted you here. Not the day you moved in, not now, not ever. Every person on this block wished you'd disappear. They're just too polite to say it. But me?" He tapped his chest. "I'm not polite." Derek hopped off the hood and circled behind her. Cody stood, pocketed his phone, blocked the stairwell. 3 points of a triangle. Brianna at the center. She set her bag down slowly, placed it against the wall with the zipper facing out. "I'm asking one more time. Let me pass." The humor drained from Wade's face. What replaced it was something uglier, something inherited, something his father had nurtured since childhood like a poisonous vine. Or what? He flicked his bottle. Beer splashed across her face, dripped down her chin, soaked into her collar. "What's a dirty little black girl gonna do about it, huh? You gonna cry? You gonna run? Call the police?" He laughed and looked at his friends for approval. "Baby, the police are on my side." Derek grabbed her arm from behind and shoved her hard into the corner. Her back hit the wall. The concrete was cold through her shirt. Cody closed in from the left. 3 bodies between her and every way out. "You know what I think?" Wade leaned in until his face was inches from hers. His breath reeked of cheap bourbon and chewing tobacco. His eyes were glassy and full of something worse than anger. Enjoyment. "I think tonight we teach you a real lesson about where you belong." He grabbed her collar with his left hand, twisted the fabric until it pressed against her throat, cocked his right fist back. Brianna's eyes changed, not a flinch. Something behind the iris shifted, a switch flipping in a machine that had been powered down for 2 years. Her breathing slowed. Shoulders dropped half an inch. Weight settled into the balls of her feet. Her hands came up, not fists, open palms, relaxed fingers, a fighting stance that 99% of people would never recognize. "I warned you," she said, quiet, almost gentle. 3 times. Wade swung. He never connected. Brianna caught his wrist mid-arc. Her right hand locked under his elbow. She rotated, one sharp, surgical twist, and Wade's arm hyperextended with a wet pop that echoed through the garage like a gunshot. He screamed. His knees buckled. She guided him face first into the concrete, pinned his twisted arm behind his back with 2 fingers and her body weight. His cheek scraped the oil-stained floor. His screams turned to whimpers. His legs kicked uselessly against the ground. 2 seconds. Derek charged from behind, boots scraping, breathing ragged. No technique, no plan, just 200 pounds of blind momentum. Brianna released Wade, pivoted on her left foot, and drove her right elbow straight into Derek's solar plexus. The impact folded him in half like a newspaper. Air left his lungs in one violent, wet gasp. He staggered backward, hit the pillar spine first, and slid down to the floor. His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. 4 seconds. Cody hesitated. That was his mistake. He grabbed a beer bottle by the neck and swung wide, a clumsy, panicked haymaker. Brianna ducked under the arc, swept his lead leg with a low kick at the exact angle they taught at Fort Bragg. 35 degrees, inside edge, maximum torque. Cody's ankle folded. He crashed face down onto the oil-stained concrete. The bottle shattered beside his head. She stepped on his wrist, just enough pressure to pin, not to break, and kicked the broken glass away from his face. 7 seconds. 3 men. 7 seconds. Brianna Irving stood in the center of the garage without a scratch, not a hair out of place. Her breathing hadn't changed. Her hands hung loose at her sides, open, the same way they'd started. She picked up her bag, brushed the fleck of concrete dust off the strap, and slung it over her shoulder. Wade lay cradling his arm. Tears and snot ran down his chin. "My dad," he gasped. "My dad's gonna... You have no idea what's coming for you." Brianna looked down at him. She didn't smile this time. "Tell your dad. Tell the news. Tell everyone." Her voice was flat, measured, terrifyingly calm. "And tell them I warned you. 3 times." She stepped over Derek's legs and walked out of the garage into the warm Memphis night. What none of them knew, what Brianna hadn't planned for, was the witness. A young couple returning to their car on the second level had heard the shouting and the slurs. The woman pressed record the moment Wade grabbed Brianna's collar. She captured everything from a clear, elevated angle, every word, every shove, every second of the fight. The audio was pristine. By midnight, the video was on Twitter with the caption, "3 drunk men cornered a black woman in a parking garage. Watch what happens next." By Saturday morning, 3 million views. By Sunday, 12 million. By Monday, the number stopped mattering. It was everywhere. #GarageJustice trended in 14 countries. Retired Marines analyzed the fight frame by frame on YouTube. Self-defense instructors broke down her technique in reaction videos. Women shared the clip with the caption, "This is what training looks like." Men shared it with, "Those guys are lucky she stopped at 7 seconds." But the reaction wasn't unanimous. Local stations ran the clip beside Brianna's DMV photo, deliberately unflattering, under the chyron, "Military-trained woman assaults 3 local men in parking garage." Half the country called her a hero. The other half called her a threat. And in a wood-paneled office on the east side of Memphis, Deputy Chief Ray Thornton watched the video on mute. He watched it 3 times. His jaw tightened. He picked up his desk phone and called the district attorney's personal number. "I want her arrested," he said. "Tonight." They came for her at 6 in the morning. 2 squad cars, 4 officers, blue lights pulsing across the front of her apartment like a heartbeat. Mrs. Patterson watched from behind her curtain across the hall, hand pressed to her mouth. Brianna opened the door before they knocked. She was already dressed, already calm. She held out her wrists without being asked. "The charge?" Aggravated assault on 3 victims. The officers cuffed her in the doorway, walked her down the stairs, and put her in the back of a cruiser. One of them, a young officer she'd never seen before, avoided eye contact the entire time. The other one didn't. "Heard you like to fight," he said, adjusting the cuffs a notch tighter than necessary. "Let's see how tough you are now." By 9 a.m., Brianna's mugshot was on every local news station in Memphis. The photo was stark, harsh fluorescent lighting, no makeup, her expression flat and unreadable. The chyron beneath it read, "Former military woman charged with assault on 3 unarmed men." Not self-defense, not attacked by, assault on. The language was deliberate. Deputy Chief Ray Thornton had made 3 phone calls before breakfast, one to the district attorney, one to the news director at Channel 5, one to the editor of the Memphis Herald. By the time Brianna's booking was processed, the narrative had already been written. Channel 5 led with it at noon. The anchor, a polished blonde woman with a concerned expression that never quite reached her eyes, read from the teleprompter. "A Memphis woman with military combat training is in custody tonight after allegedly attacking 3 local men in a parking garage. The victims say the assault was unprovoked." They showed Wade's interview next. He sat in a hospital chair with his right arm in a sling, a butterfly bandage over his left eyebrow, and the practiced expression of a man who'd been coached. His father stood just off camera. Brianna knew because she saw Ray Thornton's polished shoes at the edge of the frame in the raw footage that would surface later. "We were just hanging out," Wade said, voice trembling with manufactured vulnerability. "Just talking. And she came at us out of nowhere. No warning. Nothing." He winced, timed perfectly, and touched his sling. "I thought she was going to kill us. I really did." Derek and Cody gave matching statements. Same phrases, same cadence, same lawyer. The internet, which had erupted in Brianna's favor just 48 hours earlier, split down the middle. Hashtag Garage Justice still trended, but now it competed with hashtag Lock Her Up and hashtag Dangerous Woman. Cable news pundits argued in split-screen segments that generated more heat than light. One called her a hero. Another called her a ticking time bomb with a government-trained body. Nobody talked about the slurs. Nobody mentioned who cornered whom. The video was everywhere, but the framing around it had been carefully, surgically altered. Back in Memphis, the consequences stacked up like bricks in a wall. Monday, Brianna's landlord slid a 30-day eviction notice under her door. No reason given, just violation of community standards. Tuesday, Second Gear's front window was shattered overnight. This time nobody bothered with spray paint. They threw a cinder block with a note rubber-banded to it. "Leave or burn." Wednesday, her last 2 regular customers stopped coming. The laundromat owner next door asked her, politely, apologetically, eyes on the floor, to stop parking her bike out front. "It's scaring people," he said. He didn't say which people. Brianna sat in her empty shop that evening, surrounded by bikes she'd fixed for people who no longer wanted to know her. The fluorescent tube above the workbench buzzed. A fly circled the ceiling. The silence was heavier than any punch she'd ever taken. Then the phone rang. "Miss Irving? My name is Grant Holloway. I'm an attorney. I specialize in defending veterans who've been wrongfully charged. I saw your video." A pause. All of it, including the parts the news isn't showing. Grant Holloway was 45, silver-templed, and built like a man who'd spent his 20s carrying a rucksack through places that didn't appear on civilian maps. He'd served 8 years as a JAG officer, Judge Advocate General before going into private practice. He'd defended 12 veterans in excessive force cases. He'd won 11. He drove to Memphis from Nashville the next morning, sat across from Brianna in the visitation room at the county jail. She'd been denied bail at Ray Thornton's recommendation, and opened a leather folder. "I'm going to be direct with you," he said. "They're not prosecuting you because you defended yourself. They're prosecuting you because you won. And because you're black. And because the man you beat is the deputy chief's son." Brianna said nothing. She looked at her hands on the metal table. "I've already pulled the full security footage from all 3 of your cameras. I've pulled the garage's own CCTV. I have 4 angles that show Wade Thornton initiating physical contact. I have audio of every racial slur." He leaned forward. "But that's not why I drove 4 hours to get here." He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were 4 police reports, or rather, 4 complaint numbers with no reports attached. 4 separate incidents, 4 different victims, all black, all filed against Wade Thornton over the past 3 years. All marked closed, insufficient evidence by the same reviewing officer, Deputy Chief Ray Thornton. "His own father buried them," Grant said. "Every single one." Brianna opened the folder, read the names, read the dates. Her jaw tightened. The last entry was a woman named Keisha Moore, 26, nursing student. Wade had followed her home from a bar 18 months ago, grabbed her arm, called her things that Keisha still couldn't repeat in the formal complaint she'd tried to file. Ray Thornton had personally visited Keisha's apartment the next day and suggested she reconsider her statement. She withdrew it that afternoon. Grant closed the folder. "Keisha called me yesterday. She's ready to testify. So are 2 of the others." He looked Brianna in the eye. "You're not the first woman Wade Thornton terrorized. But if we do this right, you'll be the last." Brianna sat very still. The fluorescent light hummed above them. Somewhere down the corridor, a steel door slammed shut. "When's the trial?" she asked. 3 weeks. She nodded once. "I'll be ready." That night, alone in her cell, Brianna lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the garage, about Wade's face when his arm popped, about the look in his eyes. Not pain, but shock. The shock of a man who had never, not once in his entire life, faced a consequence. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, she slept without dreaming. The courtroom was standing room only. Every seat in courtroom 4B of the Shelby County Criminal Justice Center was taken by 8:45, 15 minutes before the session was scheduled to begin. Reporters filled the first 2 rows. 3 sketch artists sat shoulder to shoulder near the jury box. Outside, a line of people stretched past the metal detectors and down the marble steps to the street. 2 news vans had their satellite dishes pointed at the Tennessee sky. Brianna walked in wearing a navy blazer that Nina Calloway had brought to the jail the night before. Her hair was pulled back. Her hands were unshackled. Grant had fought for that and won. She sat beside him at the defense table, back straight, eyes forward. She didn't look at Wade. She didn't look at Ray Thornton, who sat 3 rows behind the prosecution in a charcoal suit, arms crossed, jaw set like stone. The prosecution's attorney was Harrison Cole, 52, silver cufflinks, a reputation for never losing cases that involved law enforcement families. He spoke first. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury." Cole stood slowly, buttoning his jacket. "This case is not complicated. A woman with extensive military combat training, A woman trained by the United States government to incapacitate and kill attacked 3 unarmed civilians in a parking garage. She broke one man's arm. She fractured another's ribs. She did this not because she was in danger, but because she could. He paused, let the word hang. Because she wanted to. He turned to face Brianna. Brianna Irving is not a victim. She is a weapon. And weapons that cannot be controlled must be contained. The courtroom was silent. Cole sat down. Ray Thornton uncrossed his arms and nodded, a small private gesture meant only for his son. Grant Holloway stood. He didn't button his jacket. He didn't pace. He walked to the center of the courtroom floor, stopped, and looked at the jury the way a teacher looks at a class before delivering the most important lesson of the semester. The prosecution just called my client a weapon. His voice was calm, conversational, almost soft. Let me show you what actually happened to this so-called weapon on the night of April 11th. He clicked the remote. The courtroom's mounted screens flickered to life. 4 camera angles appeared simultaneously. A quad split that showed the garage from every direction. Grant played the footage in real time. No edits, no cuts, no narration. The courtroom watched Wade Thornton block Brianna's path. They heard the slurs. They watched Derek shove her into the corner. They saw Cody block the exit. They heard Wade say, "What's a dirty little black girl gonna do about it?" They watched him splash beer in her face. They watched him grab her collar and cock his fist. And they watched Brianna warn him 3 times. "Let me through, please." "I'm asking one more time." "I warned you 3 times." Grant paused the footage on the frame where Wade's fist was mid-swing, aimed directly at Brianna's face. "That," Grant said, pointing at the screen, "is the moment my client defended herself. Not before, not after. That exact moment. The prosecution wants you to believe she attacked 3 unarmed men. The footage shows 3 men who cornered a woman in a dark garage, called her an animal, splashed alcohol in her face, and threw the first punch." He lowered his hand. Everything she did after that was survival. Cole objected. The judge overruled. Grant called his first witness. Colonel James Whitfield, retired, 28 years in Army Special Operations, expert in close-quarters combat assessment. Whitfield walked to the stand like a man who'd testified in rooms far more dangerous than this one. "Colonel, you've reviewed the footage. In your professional opinion, did Ms. Irving use excessive force?" Whitfield didn't hesitate. "No, sir. Every technique she employed was textbook defensive restraint. The wrist lock on the first attacker, the elbow strike to the second, the leg sweep on the third, all minimum necessary force responses to imminent physical threats." He looked at the jury. A trained Delta Force operator at full capacity could have caused permanent damage to all 3 men in under 5 seconds. Ms. Irving chose not to. She used the least amount of force required to stop the attack. That's not aggression. That's discipline. Could she have killed them? Yes. Why didn't she? Because she's a professional. Professionals don't escalate. They resolve. The courtroom shifted. Jurors leaned forward. A woman in row 6 pressed her hand to her chest. Then Grant called Keisha Moore. Keisha was 26. She wore a white blouse buttoned to the collar and kept her hands folded in her lap. Her voice was steady, but her left knee bounced beneath the witness stand. She told them everything. The night Wade followed her from the bar, the names he called her, the way he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave fingerprint bruises she photographed the next morning, the police report she filed, and the visit the next afternoon from Deputy Chief Ray Thornton himself.
"He came to my apartment," Keisha said. "He didn't threaten me, not exactly. He just said it would be better for everyone if I reconsidered my statement. He said things like, this have a way of getting complicated. He said his son was a good kid having a bad night." Her voice cracked. "Then he looked at my daughter's shoes by the door and said, 'Nice place you've got here. I'd hate to see anything complicate your situation.'" A murmur ran through the courtroom like a current through water. Grant introduced the complaint files. 4 victims, 4 buried reports, all black, all reviewed and closed by the same officer, Deputy Chief Ray Thornton. He displayed them on screen, one after another. Dates, names, case numbers. The word "closed" stamped in red across each one. Then he played the final piece of evidence. Audio from a body camera that one of the arresting officers had forgotten to turn off during transport. On the recording, a voice, later identified as Sergeant Collins from the Riverside Precinct, said to his partner, "The chief wants this one handled fast. Make sure the report matches Wade's statement, not hers. You know the drill." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged the gavel 3 times. Cole requested a recess. The judge denied it. Grant turned to Wade on the witness stand for cross-examination. Wade had been sitting there for 20 minutes, watching his father's system disintegrate in real time. "Mr. Thornton, did your father tell you that you were untouchable?" Wade's attorney objected. "Overruled." Wade looked at his father in the gallery. Ray Thornton stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, giving nothing. "Mr. Thornton, answer the question." Wade swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed. His eyes were wet. He said they'd never touch me. He said no matter what happened, he'd make it go away." His voice broke. "He always made it go away." The jury deliberated for 22 minutes. Not guilty. Unanimous. The courtroom broke open like a dam, cheering, crying, strangers hugging strangers. The sketch artist couldn't draw fast enough. Brianna sat perfectly still, her hands flat on the table. Tears ran down her face in 2 straight lines, silent, the way soldiers cry, without sound, without movement, just water falling. Nina pushed through the gallery railing, wrapped her arms around Brianna from behind, and held on. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Grant Holloway closed his leather folder, clicked his pen, and smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. The verdicts came down like dominoes. Wade Thornton was convicted of assault with a hate crime enhancement, 3 counts. The judge, a 61-year-old woman named Patricia Greer, who had presided over the bench for 19 years and never once raised her voice, looked at Wade for a long time before she spoke. "Mr. Thornton, you cornered a woman in a dark place. You called her names designed to strip her of her humanity. You threw alcohol in her face. You grabbed her by the throat. And when she defended herself, with extraordinary restraint, I might add, you called your father to make it disappear." She paused. 3 years, federal custody. No early parole. Wade's mother sobbed in the gallery. Wade stood with his hands cuffed in front of him, staring at the floor. He didn't look at Brianna. He couldn't.
Derek Sills received 18 months for accessory to assault and filing a false police report. Cody Branch received the same. Neither spoke during sentencing. Neither had anything left to say. But the real earthquake was Ray Thornton. The FBI had opened a formal investigation 3 days into the trial. What they found went far beyond Wade. Over 11 years as deputy chief, Ray Thornton had buried 14 complaints, all involving victims of color. He had reassigned officers who pushed back. He had promoted those who cooperated. He had built a system, quiet, efficient, invisible, that protected his son and people like his son at the expense of everyone who looked like Breonna. The federal indictment landed 2 weeks after the trial. Obstruction of justice, conspiracy to violate civil rights, destruction of evidence, abuse of authority. Ray Thornton was arrested at his home on a Tuesday morning, walked out in handcuffs past the same reporters who had once aired his son's rehearsed interview without question. He faced up to 15 years in federal prison. Harrison Cole, the attorney who had called Breonna a weapon, was referred to the Tennessee Board of Professional Responsibility for ethics violations. An internal review revealed that Cole had knowingly suppressed evidence provided by the defense during discovery. His license was suspended pending investigation. His firm issued a statement calling it a personnel matter. Nobody believed them. Sergeant Collins, the officer who had processed Breonna's vanishing police reports, was terminated. The body camera audio, the one his partner had forgotten to turn off, was played on national television. "Make sure the report matches Wade's statement, not hers. You know the drill." That sentence became its own hashtag. Hashtag You Know the Drill. It trended for 9 days. Hashtag Justice for Breonna crossed 85 million views across all platforms. The Washington Post ran a front-page profile under the headline, "The Woman Who Fought Back and Won." The New York Times editorial board published a piece titled, "When Self-Defense Becomes a Crime, the Breonna Irving Case and the System That Failed Her." Breonna declined every interview request, every book deal, every documentary pitch, every talk show invitation. She said the same thing to each one. "I'm not a story. I'm a person. And I've got work to do." She used the community donations, over $400,000 raised through a GoFundMe that Nina Calloway had set up during the trial, to lease a warehouse 3 blocks from where Second Gear used to be. She gutted it, installed mats, hung heavy bags, mounted mirrors along the walls, painted the front door olive green, the same shade as her old military duffel. She called it Iron Will Defense Center. Free classes every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday evening. Open to women of all ages, all backgrounds, with priority enrollment for women of color in underserved communities. The first class had 30 students. They stood in 3 rows of 10, nervous, unsure, some of them holding their car keys between their fingers because it was the only self-defense technique they'd ever been taught. Breonna stood in front of them. For the first time since leaving the Army, she wore a short-sleeved shirt. The scar on her right forearm, 4 inches long, pale against her dark skin, was visible to everyone. "I'm not here to teach you to fight," she said. "I'm here to teach you that you're worth defending." Nobody spoke. A woman in the back row wiped her eyes, and the lesson began. 1 year later, Iron Will Defense Center had branches in 5 states: Memphis, Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, Philadelphia, Each one painted the same olive green. Each one free. Each one run by women who had once stood where Brianna's first students stood, nervous, unsure, holding their car keys like tiny swords. Brianna was invited to speak at West Point. She stood at the podium in Thayer Hall, facing 300 cadets in gray uniforms. Behind her, the screen showed a single photograph. Not the garage, not the courtroom, not the viral clip. It was a picture of Second Gear. The little bike shop on Greer Street with the faded awning and the grease-stained workbench. "People ask me what my greatest fight was," she said. "They expect me to say the garage or the trial." She shook her head. "My greatest fight was waking up every morning in a neighborhood that didn't want me, opening a shop that people avoided, and choosing every single day not to become the thing they accused me of being." The cadets didn't clap right away. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. Then it broke, not into applause, but into something closer to recognition. The sound of 300 people understanding something they hadn't understood before. Back in Memphis, Riverside had changed again. Not the buildings, not the coffee shops or the lofts, the people. The laundromat owner who had asked Brianna to stop parking out front was one of the first to donate to Iron Will. He didn't say much. He just handed her an envelope with $300 inside and a note that said, "I should have said something. I'm sorry." Mrs. Patterson came to every Tuesday class. She never trained. She sat in a folding chair by the water cooler with a tin of pound cake on her lap and cheered like she was courtside at a championship game. When new students looked nervous, she'd wave them over and say, "Honey, if I can sit here at 72, you can stand up at whatever age you are." Keisha Moore enrolled in the Saturday class. She brought her daughter. The little girl was 5 years old, and she threw punches at the heavy bag with both fists, laughing every time it swung back. Keisha watched her from the edge of the mat. She didn't cry. She'd done enough of that. But she smiled the kind of smile that only comes after something very heavy has finally been set down. The garage on Elm Street was demolished 6 months after the trial. The city council voted unanimously to convert the lot into a community park. They asked Brianna to suggest a name. She thought about it for 3 days. She named it Second Chance Park. On the evening it opened, Brianna stood at the edge of the lot where the corner used to be. The corner where Wade had shoved her. The corner where 3 cameras had recorded 7 seconds that changed her life. There was grass now, a bench, a small oak tree that wouldn't give real shade for another decade. She touched the bark, rough, young, alive. Behind her, the Iron Will evening class was starting. Through the open warehouse door, she could hear the rhythm of gloves hitting pads, the counting, the breathing, the sound of women learning that their bodies were not things to be ashamed of, but instruments to be trusted. Brianna turned away from the tree and walked toward the sound. She had work to do. What would you have done in that garage? If 3 strangers cornered you in the dark, called you less than human, and raised a fist, what would you have done? Drop a comment. Tell me. Because I think the answer says more about who we are than we'd like to admit. If this story hits you somewhere real, share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Hit the bell. Because stories like Brianna's happen every single day. And they deserve to be told. Okay, real talk. This one hit different. Like, a woman gets cornered in a dark garage by 3 dudes and everybody just looks away? Nah. That's why I told this story. Because Brianna didn't wait for a hero. She became one. And honestly, that's the most gangster thing I've ever heard. Okay, real talk. This one hit different. Like, a woman gets cornered in a dark garage by 3 dudes, and everybody just looks away? Nah. That's why I told this story. Because Brianna didn't wait for a hero. She became one. And honestly, that's the most gangster thing I've ever heard.